Hi everybody, Professor Snart just checking in on Friday, just after the due date for Unit 8, which was Thursday. I just want to take a look at the due dates that we have coming up here. So we've finished Essays 1 and 2. Obviously 2 is just a revision of the first one, and you're integrating that secondary source. So you've written a basic research paper. It happens to be analyzing a work of literature, one of the short stories we read. But fundamentally, it's the kind of essay that you'd write in any 1102 class, the research class. So the research, obviously, that we're doing is specifically geared to the stories that we're reading, but the premise or the kind of structure of that essay is exactly the same as really anything else that you'd write as far as a research essay in other kinds of classes. So it's useful to kind of be aware of that fundamental sameness so you don't feel like you're writing a very specific kind of essay. Sort of you are, in the sense that there's particular kinds of guidelines that we follow for literary analysis, but the fundamental structure of the argument is basically the same. You put forward a thesis. Within that thesis, you develop sort of topics for topic sentences within body paragraphs. Pardon me. There's obviously details as far as primary quotation from the text that go to support those topics and develop the thesis. And then, of course, we're integrating secondary source material as part of the research component. So all of those pieces are really the same in any kind of research essay that you're writing. So I've gotten through grading all of the Unit 8 essays that I received. A couple of people had a little bit of difficulty submitting through Blackboard, which sometimes happens. It's just one of those technical things, and inevitably everything works perfectly until that moment where you basically run out of time. So always with technical things like that, you want to pursue help through the help desk, but also, of course, let me know immediately if you're having issues, just to keep me in the loop, sooner rather than later. So, but for the most part, the essays that I have, I've graded and sent back to you, so you have the grade, of course, but also the various comments that I've made. And again, you want to be really careful that you go through and look for various comments or corrections or suggestions. And of course, for this revision, it wasn't just a matter of fixing things that I'd noted from the first essay, but for some people, really reworking the thesis or organization. So I saw lots of better organization around topic ideas as opposed to what felt oftentimes like summary of the story, and then this happened, and then this, and then the end, which is good. So the revision really towards more idea-based organization. Of course, tone was improved for a lot of people, just in terms of being a lot more concise or precise, eliminating any of those extra layers of the I voice, whether that's I, you, we, the reader, just kind of extra stuff in there. So lots of good revision. And then, of course, integrating the secondary source is a matter of finding an appropriate source, which I think everybody managed to do for the most part. There's the mechanics of formatting the citation correctly once you've integrated it. And for article databases, it's actually fairly simple because we're not dealing with page numbers. So oftentimes, if you introduce a quote effectively with an author name, you're not even having to worry about citing a page number or an author or anything in that parenthetical citation. So I've actually added a few new examples that used to be in a number of different formats and places throughout the course in the MLA citation links area of our Blackboard course, just to lay out as clearly as I can some of the examples that you're going to most commonly run into as far as in-text citation. Again, those are really just collating examples from throughout the course in various places that are sometimes embedded in or part of like video announcements or video material throughout the course, so it's not all just text that you're reading. Of course, then there's also the works cited component, so you have at least 2 entries for your works cited for Essay 2. Those would have been 1, the short story from the textbook, and then, of course, the article database itself, or the database article itself, formatted correctly. I provided, again, lots of really straightforward or kind of direct right there for you models or examples to follow. It's sort of funny, I have to be honest, when I, for example, had my recent announcement was about what a pain in the neck it is that some of the databases give you what they think should be the formatting for the works cited entry if you're using a particular article. Like the Literature Resource Center gives you incorrect formatting, and I've actually put this in an earlier announcement, you can read it. And I can tell right away that it's not correct because it provides this reprinted in, or RPT, in Literature Resource Center. So a lot of the components are correct there, but it's not exactly correct. So it's unfortunate that the database provides that, but I pointed this out, and then this exact mistake shows up in a few people's essays. So I just want to remind you to be sure you're paying attention to everything that's going on in the course. Obviously, these video announcements, whatever text I add to it, material from the units, from additional help sections that we have, obviously from previous units. So you're trying to coordinate all this stuff, which is a lot of work, but that's the work of the class. I mean, that's all you're having to do. Obviously there's no face-to-face class time that you're putting in, so it's all happening through this interface, which, is maybe not the best depending on your learning style, but it really becomes, the ball is really in your court as far as making sure that you're, keeping up to date and looking at all this stuff carefully, not just sort of breezing through and looking for what seems like the important stuff and then just doing that. Okay, so quickly then, before I run out of time on my YouTube announcement here, I'm going to scroll into Unit 9, which is what we look at now, which is the beginning stages of the final research paper for the class. So the rest of the units we have are all various steps or stages that we'll be working through as far as completing the final essay. So there's the one essay left, but we're working in a number of different steps or stages of the process here. The main focus is Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman as far as the reading that we're now into. So there's a brief discussion board just trying to get you to begin to think about, pardon me as I lose my voice, some of the more important themes in the play. So in many ways, Unit 9 is kind of like a reading and brainstorming session. But I'm going to focus here on the final essay assignment, again, assigned here in Unit 9, but not due until the end of the course as a complete essay, because there's some requirements or components that you want to make sure you understand at the very start of the process so that you can develop a topic that's going to work, and of course so that you produce a paper that fulfills the assignment at the end of it. The first thing to note is the length, about 6 pages. Obviously that doesn't include any works cited pages that you've got, so 6 text pages, again double-spaced. The secondary source requirements, important, and I'm just reiterating what's already in the unit here, is that you have 4 secondary sources. And remember that a primary source, like the play, the short story, any of that, the literary stuff, doesn't count as a secondary source. It's a primary source. So one of the things I'll look for in that final essay is if you've got, are showing that you understand the difference between primary versus secondary material. Pretty fundamental part of the research class, English 1102 here. Okay, so 4 secondary sources, not general web stuff, not material that's just related tangentially to an idea in Death of a Salesman, like business ethics or something like that. You're looking for books and articles particularly on Death of a Salesman, the discussion of that play or of Willy Loman as a character in that play or whatever, but not just generally related ideas. At least 1 database source. Simple, you've already done that for essay number 2. At least 1 book source, so not electronic. Easiest thing to do, go to the library, the COD library website, or any library, public library, or excuse me, college library that might be close to you. And there's actually material in the in our course here about effectively doing this. but really just searching for, you can search by subject, death of a salesman, subject, Miller, Arthur. You could even search as a keyword, death of a salesman. You're almost guaranteed to get results that are book, so not electronic, discussions of that play particularly. So you got one database, one book, and then the two remaining of the four total can be sources of your choice, pardon me, but again, not general web stuff and not just tangentially related kind of discussions of ideas or themes that also show up in the play, actual discussions of the play, Death of a Salesman. And I use that example because I think most people will probably write on Death of a Salesman, but you're not actually required to. It's an obvious choice just because there's lots going on in the play, so there's lots of material to work with, and it's very famous. I'm sure you've heard of it. There's lots of secondary material, so you don't run into any problems with not being able to find stuff. So one database, one book, two of your choice. Probably for most people, those would be other database articles, just because they're relatively easy to search for, especially if you're not on campus, but they could easily be print sources as well. Okay, so fundamentally, understanding the difference between primary and secondary sources, and then of course finding the right kind of secondary sources. The topic guidelines. What you'll see is that I haven't given you prompts to write on, so starting the essay is actually a little more difficult than beginning some of the earlier essays where you did have specific prompts or particular ideas or questions that I was prompting you with. So there's no, discuss the theme of gender expectations in one of the works. There's no prompt like that. You're developing really your own prompt, but of course you want to use some of the earlier prompts as guidelines in terms of the sort of scope and the approach and the tone that those are involving. So you're still doing really the same kind of literary analysis essay we've done before. It's just that you're developing your own topic, which again, like I said, it makes things a little more difficult to start because you don't have that question that you need to answer immediately that I've provided. But in the end, the essay tends to be more meaningful and personally interesting because obviously you've developed the topic. So what you might do is just think in terms of an important theme in the work, like Death of a Salesman, and discuss that. You could also do more of a comparison paper where you've run into a character or theme in the works that we've read that you think is interesting and really important and obvious. And if you know of that same kind of theme or particular kind of character in any other book that you've read or movie that you've seen or TV show that you watch, that can be your second primary text. So you could do a comparison as long as something is from our syllabus or our course. The other thing that you involve doesn't necessarily need to be from our textbook or even really literary in the traditional sense. It could be, like I said, a popular movie, book, short story you read elsewhere, anything like that. I always encourage you, though, to check with me early if you're having ideas about this so that you know if you're making good choices about the primary texts that you might use. So are you required to use something outside of the course? No. Are you required to write on two primary texts? No. You could just choose one. And again, Death of a Salesman's an obvious choice because it's long, there's lots to say about it, and there's really good secondary source material. So that part is up to you and is certainly one of the hardest parts of this essay, to be perfectly honest, is just developing a topic that's going to work in terms of scope and idea, but that's also interesting to you. So that's obviously more challenging than me just telling you what to do. But like I said before, it usually ends up better because you're a little more personally invested in what's going on. So if you have any ideas off the top of your head, by all means be in touch with me. I'd love to hear what they are and help you kind of refine that topic and develop a thesis. Okay, so as we continue to move through our course, we are kind of unbelievably getting towards the end of it. So we're past the midpoint now and getting into the final essay that we've got, and I'm almost at my time limit, which is unbelievable. So I'm going to sign off really quickly, and if you have questions, be in touch. 5 seconds to spare.